Well, ASPI maintains a team working on disinformation that's occurring around the world. So we have a team of analysts that have really great big data skills. They take these huge data sets and analyze them. So they analyze state propaganda in particular, and this can involve millions and millions of tweets or Facebook posts, and trying to synthesize them, make sense of them, and understand what states are trying to communicate and the types of covert campaigns that different nation states are running.
So what did you find when it came to the way China was posting information about Ukraine?
Well, what was really interesting about this case, and what was most concerning to me personally, was you've got the Chinese state, a state that's purporting to be, a would-be replacement to the United States as a world superpower, openly engaging in spreading conspiracy theories. Now, the campaign that we looked at is Chinese diplomats and officials messaging about the war in Ukraine. We looked at 11,500 tweets, 2,500 Facebook posts, and we looked at the different narratives that they were trying to push. Now, a lot of that was blaming the West for the war, the United States, NATO, the West in general for starting the war. But it also was pushing a lot of Russian narratives into the ecosystem that were, the West has tried to block Russia from communicating with using its propaganda. So we've blocked Sputnik, we've blocked RT, but into that void, China's willingly stepped up, and its diplomats and its officials are starting to basically repeat Russian propaganda into the global ecosystem.
Which is interesting because they're not publicly saying very much. They're not coming out strongly for Russia. So is this sort of a covert way of doing it? And who are they hoping to target?
Well, we looked at Chinese diplomats and officials all around the world. So most of the communications were in English. They communicated, though, in about 25 different languages, and a real minority of them, those messages were in Chinese. So they're clearly communicating to external audiences with an attempt to try to shape them and influence them. Now, you're right that China hasn't been sort of openly condemning the war in Ukraine. It hasn't been blaming Russia for that war, but it's been repeating a lot of Russian narratives around this. So it's been talking about the West caused this war. It wasn't Russia. They're wedged a little bit when it comes to sovereignty because China's been banging on forever that it stands up for state sovereignty. But here you've got a cut and dried case of Russia invading another country and trying to seize its territory for no reason whatsoever. So they're caught a little bit there. But they're also repeating, Russian conspiracy theories. They're calling the Ukrainian government, neo-Nazis, even though it's run by a Jewish Ukrainian. They're repeating conspiracy theories about biological labs run in Ukraine by the United States. So I think that's really concerning to see, a serious country engage in that kind of activity.
And what do you think their agenda is? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, as we saw, President Xi and President Putin met just before the Olympic Games in China and announced a partnership with no limits. So President Xi of China has, basically, nailed himself to Putin in this partnership. He was probably, persuaded by Putin that, it'd be done and dusted in a couple of days and everyone would move on and forget about Ukraine now that it was part of Russia. Clearly, it hasn't gone that way, and now they're locked into this intractable war that's highlighting, a long-running war that's going to, is just highlighting the fact that Russia has flagrantly invaded another country for no reason whatsoever. It's mobilized a whole bunch of democratic states against Russia to push back and support the Ukrainians. That's very problematic for President Xi because it's going against a key cornerstone of Chinese foreign policy, at least how it's articulated, that the big states should invade other states, or no state should invade other states for no reason. But nonetheless, he's hitched to this, this commitment. So They're spouting Russian propaganda back to global audiences. And a lot of them the messages do align with Chinese interests. So, China, perennial issues for China around security blocks. So that might be referring to NATO in this case, but in China's region, it's talking about, AUKUS and the Quad, which it finds problematic.
So, and that's a great point you make, because of course, Australia's new Prime Minister is going to Tokyo for a Quad meeting. Is China very angry? What are you picking up about how they are communicating that through these measures?
Well, I think China definitely views the Quad and AUKUS as a threat. It's concerned about security pacts and groups of states that might be able to push back against, its efforts to push on other states. So China is asserting itself all across the region and internationally. We're seeing it exert, really assertive, take really assertive steps even at countries as far away as Lithuania. It's deleted Lithuania from its, customs form. You cannot import anything into China from Lithuania. So it's pushing aggressively on lots of states. It's started a border skirmish with India. Countries around the region are starting to feel this pressure. So when states start to band together to push back against that type of aggression and assertion, they see that as a threat.
Yeah. I mean, what is also concerning is the sort of subversion of truth, and we're seeing this with a lot of state players. Should social media companies really be censoring this misinformation?
Well, I think this is a really interesting question for democratic states. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a large number of states took the position that they were going to block RT and Sputnik, Russian state media mouthpieces, from communicating in their markets, because they thought it was inappropriate to have an aggressive state like Russia be able to have the freedom to spout propaganda however it wanted through these channels. But now we have a situation where Chinese diplomats around the world have filled that void and are just repeating Russian propaganda into our information ecosystems. So I think there's a question for democratic states. Do they want to allow that type of deliberate effort to push propaganda to the point of spreading, very obvious conspiracy theories? Now, that's a tough one for democratic states because we're balancing the right to freedom of expression. But I think it's becoming a serious policy question because we now have, such flagrant spreading of lies, not even sort of, grey zone types of border cases. It's just out and out falsehoods.
Challenging indeed. Good to talk. Very interesting research. Thanks for your time, Fergus.
Thanks so much for having me.